Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we decided that since the annual meeting is in Eastern Montana, maybe what we would do is, and since Giovanna couldn't make it, is we would just show some slides of Eastern Montana. And I've worked for like 40 years in Eastern Montana. And so I've gotten around quite a bit and I have stories to tell and that sort of thing. So I guess that's what I'm gonna do. And we'll see how it works out, huh? All right, so the vegetation is really in Montana is pretty variable because it's such a big state and we have the mountains in the west and we have the Great Plains in the east. And so that's, you know, that's one of the major things that's going on. And, you know, the floras are pretty different. So that's going to be, you know, keep that in mind. But this is more this is more important. So I'm gonna, I guess this is what I'm going to use, I think. So here's the big ice sheet. And north of this ice sheet is pretty different than south of the ice sheet. And one of the main things is what the landscape looks like. So I remember many years ago, I was talking to a faculty member at the university and he had just, it was September, he had just started teaching and he said, oh God, I got to teach. And then he said, well, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm going to go camping in Eastern Montana. And he looked at me with this very puzzled look on his face and said, why would you do that? Because this is what everybody thinks Eastern Montana is like. And part of it, the part that's been glaciated, is like this. Okay, and so one of the important things, you can't tell it from this photo, but this is all crested wheatgrass, which is not native. Okay, so that area that I showed you that had all the glaciers over it, that was really level ground. And so when homesteaders came out here, they looked at that and they went, whoa, we can do something with that. And they plowed it up and they planted crops and they did all right for a while. And then we had the drought of the 30s. And all the soil started blowing away and they couldn't make anything happen. And so they bailed out. And meanwhile, the dust and stuff was going all the way to Washington, D.C. And so they decided we got to do something about this. So they went up to Canada and the Canadians had been developing this crested wheatgrass for pastures. And so at the time, I don't think the BLM was there at the time, but you know, another part of the government went in and took all this barren ground that was up there on the High Line in north and planted it to crested wheatgrass. So a lot of what you're going to see in Eastern Montana north of the river, of the Missouri River, is going to be crested wheatgrass. And it's really hard to get rid of crested wheatgrass. So anyhow, that's enough for that. There is some. So this is also up there, north of the Missouri River. This is the Bitter Creek. I think it's a wilderness study area on BLM land. And it's flat as a pancake, but because it was hard to get to, or for some reason, they did not plow this up. And so this is what native grassland looked like before the homesteaders got there. So, and it's, you know, it's, there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of habitat diversity. It's all this kind of level grassland, but it's still pretty nice country with a lot of, you know, not a lot of native plants, a lot of native flowers. And in the right places, there's a lot of sagebrush. So this is Artemisia tridentata subspecies Wyomingensis. And you can see that there's you know, that there, up here, there's not any sagebrush, but down here, there is. And that's because sagebrush likes good soil. And so up on the slopes, the soil is thinner and it's not very good for sagebrush. If you get down in the bottoms, especially along streams and that sort of thing, the sagebrush does pretty well. So there was, you know, this mosaic of sagebrush and grassland on all this flat country out there. Here's another example that you can see that the sagebrush really likes that, you know, along the creek there, where the soil is better, and then you get up on the slope and it's gone.
Are those buttercups?
You know, I don't really know what those are. I probably took this picture 20 years ago and I don't know, but if, you know, it was what I wanted. You can see the little stream there. And again, you can see that up here, there isn't much sagebrush, but down here there is. Okay, so here's another, so this is back, I think this is back again in the Bitter Creek area. And there's some, you know, there's some of this soil. So here, this stuff is probably, there's probably a lot of crested wheatgrass here, but I'm not sure of that. But up here, it's clay. And so you don't hardly have anything growing there. There might be some sagebrush and there's probably a few little shrubs growing here and there, but that's what it's like. But anyhow, the Bitter Creek area is actually pretty cool for walking around in because there's nothing, you know, there's not a whole lot of variability in elevation, but there's enough that you can go from in different habitats. So it's a pretty good area, especially for that northeastern part of Montana.
What's a town that's nearby?
Well, it's kind of east, not too far east and north of Fort Peck Reservoir, if that helps you. So it's pretty, you know, it's maybe 100 miles or something like that from North Dakota. Okay, and so this is just what the landscapes look like out in some of that northeastern country. And you can see that it's not flat. So this part isn't flat. You've got breaks like that, and you've got, you know, your stream along streams there, and, you know, probably some junipers and maybe even an occasional ponderosa pine. Okay, I'm not sure what that is. I think it's probably an oxytrophus. Yeah, that'd be my best guess. A legume, and there's a white penstemon right down there. But anyhow, that's kind of what that country is like. Okay, so here's a few plants. And so, you know, Tegan's right. I could forget all these names. So I put them up there. And so I can tell you that that's Coryphantha missouriensis in the cactus family. And it's probably, there's two little cactus like that out there in eastern Montana, but this is the common one. The purple flowered one is probably a little prettier, but it's not nearly as common. Okay, now that used to be Haplopappus, but now it's Stenotus acaulis. And this could be what that yellow stuff was on the slope, maybe. I don't know, it depends on the time of year, but that slope is probably too dry for buttercups, I would think. Anyhow, so this is another, this plant barely gets west of the divide, but as soon as you get on the east side, you know, as soon as you get to Shoto and even right on the front, this stuff is common, very common. Okay, Castanea sessiliflora. Oops. You got to realize I did this all this morning, and so that S shouldn't be there. Yeah, it's not Florsa, it's just Flora. Anyhow, this is another one that's only east of the divide. So you won't find that around here, but it's pretty attractive, very long flowers. Asclepias viridiflora. Another one that's only that we don't have west of the divide. So I think there's a good 4 milkweeds that are east of the divide and don't make it over here. We only have the showy milkweeds, Asclepias speciosa. Okay, so what I probably should have started the talk with this, but what I'm trying to do is sort of divide up eastern Montana into kind of gross habitats. So we've just looked at the northern plains stuff. And now we're going to start moving south. And you start getting into a lot of this kind of these breaks. So there's a lot of these hillsides that are just, clay and that sort of thing, and not a whole lot of vegetation on them. And, in between, there's still grasslands and that sort of thing. There's another one there. So that country, you can walk around in that country for a long time, and you can get lost in it pretty easily too. Okay, so Enotherus espitosa. This one's got a bunch of common names. I'm really bad on the common names, but I mean, I'm sure you guys aren't interested in that, right? Okay, what's the common name for this one? Yeah, it's an evening primrose, right? Yeah, but there's another common name for it, I think. Gumbo lily, right, and it likes those breaks, that that deep clay-like soil. Astragalus missouriensis. This is one of the most common milk vetches in eastern Montana. There aren't any fruits there, but it has big sort of watermelon shaped fruits. Not as big as a watermelon, but that's the right shape, and they're kind of speckled, and it's pretty obvious. This one is fairly rare, but I threw it in anyways. It's Prunus pumila, and that's as big as it gets. So, it probably never gets more than 12 inches high. And it occurs in very dry habitats. As you can see, this is pretty open, dry habitats. But I think it's known from maybe 2 or 3 counties in the far eastern part of the state.
So is it a little bitty chokecherry?
Well, I don't think you would call it a chokecherry, but it is a cherry, I guess.
Does it get
Yeah, although I've never seen the fruits, but yeah, I'm sure it does. Yeah. Okay, this is not my photograph, but I put this in there because I wanted to show you. So we're actually back up in the northeastern part of the state, but just in that small area there, as you can see from this map, there's a lot of prairie potholes. And this was caused by the glaciers. The glaciers dug out these shallow potholes. And so all around, kind of in the Plentywood country, in that area, you have this kind of stuff. So, oops, let's try, yeah. So there's what, and I mean, these are just common as could be in that little part of the state. What time of year? Well, my guess is that I probably mostly worked out there in May and June. So that's when it would be in mosquito season. Okay, so here's another major habitat type. This is a riparian cottonwood forest that you find along the major rivers and maybe a major creek. But they're pretty good habitats, but they're almost all Like, I'll bet you that most of that vegetation on the ground there are introduced grasses. Because this is where cows hang out in the summer. And so, that's the way it goes. But I did a lot of study with this, with some of you may know Scott Miles. And we did a lot of work out there. And one of the things that's interesting about this stuff is that what has to happen is, so there's none right along here because the river is cutting this away, and it's depositing soil over here. And on that newly deposited soil, you get the cottonwood seedlings. That's what they have to have. They have to have open, wet soil to get started. And then once they do, so 20 years ago, this was open, wet soil. And then here's some more, but these are younger. And then here, these are even younger. And so that's when you go and you see these forests very often, that's what it's like. There's like 3 or 4 age groups. But then later on, what starts happening is the river moves and it starts cutting this stuff away. So it goes back and forth like that. It makes for a pretty interesting landscape. Like you can see some pretty old forests up there, much older than these are. Okay, so there's a common member of the riparian forest. That's a grape, Vitis riparian. And there's Celastra scandens, and that has a common name too, but I'll be damned if I can remember. How about, no, Kelly, you can't come up with it, huh? Okay, well, we won't worry about it. I got a book here and I can look it up, but it's pretty showy. It also occurs in the uplands, like along creeks as well, not just along rivers. And Biden cernua is one, and I think we have Biden cernua here, but where it mostly occurs is on those flats right next to the river. And it will occur with seedlings of cottonwood, but it likes that disturbed, moist soil along the riverbanks.
Nodding beggar.
I'm sorry?
Nodding beggar.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cernua means nodding. Okay. Okay. So now so this is the one that I've probably spent 10 or 15 years with. So people think that, Montana is just this plain of grass and stuff. But in fact, especially in the eastern tier of counties, but even further west than that, you have green ash. And it fills all of these little draws like that. And so I grew up in Wisconsin. And this is the westernmost extension of the eastern deciduous forest. So you actually have American elm in here, and you have green ash, and box elder, which is a maple, and it's native in eastern Montana. So you have this, this very toned down eastern deciduous forest in these habitats in eastern Montana. So there's another one. And if you weren't paying attention, you might think this is coming from
Where is more specific location for that one?
Where is it?
Where is it?
it's like Fallon County, or in the eastern tier, southeastern tier of counties. But actually it gets up these get up fairly far north. But yeah, they're mostly the eastern tier of counties, and you can find them again in the next tier of counties. But they start to diminish as soon as you start going west. So let's see what's next. Okay, so this is this is kind of what the understory looks like when it hasn't been disturbed by livestock grazing. So it's pretty, I mean, and this is what I remember, sort of remember, you know, the forests, these forests in Wisconsin and northern Illinois. Kind of, you know, if it hadn't been disturbed, I think, yeah, here's another picture right of the ground at the ground level. So there's, you know, there's a bunch of different species there. There's, you know, a pretty good diversity, probably not as good as Wisconsin or Illinois, but, you know, pretty good diversity. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on with these forests. So the BLM paid me for like, you know, 10 or 12 years to study this stuff. And the reason they did, let's see, I think it's maybe the next photo. Yeah, the reason they did is because it's really important for animals out in that country. So, you know, deer and all that, you know, that they hang out in these green ash draws. And there's birds out there like this wood thrush that you're not going to find anywhere else in Montana, but just in these green ash draws, you know, on the east end of the state. Okay. So that's, and what they were worried about was most of their green ash stands look like this now. And what's going on here is that cows, just like with the river bottoms, cows hang out in here and get rid of all of the understory, and now it's just introduced grasses. So I was supposed to try to figure out what was going on and what was going to have to happen to make it stop. The other thing that's interesting about this, so I did some studies and stuff, and I found that if you got rid of those grasses, you could get green ash coming back. But it turns out that it didn't, the little green ash seedlings, you know, over the length of my, you know, maybe the 4 years of my study, didn't really grow. And there weren't any cows, you know, we fenced the cows out and everything. And I did not understand. Another thing that was is that I would age these trees, and the trees turned out to be, what would it be? About 70 years old, something like that. So most of them had started in the 1930s. And that just, I couldn't figure that out, because that was the driest time in eastern Montana. And that's when these trees established. And it turns out that that's also when the ranchers went away, because they couldn't raise any crops. And so they bailed out. And so you had all this open ground that the trees could come back in. Finally, the other problem is that for anything to establish, but especially the trees, you need moisture. And so, you know, a friend of mine, a rancher friend that I got to know, showed me a whole bunch of pictures of his place 30 or 40 years ago. And in the spring, all of these draws, all of these little riparian drainages were filled with snow. And that snow would slowly melt, and there'd be water in it for, you know, a couple of months. And that's not happening anymore. Now, there isn't much snow. Hardly ever is there a lot of snow in these draws. So you've got like a triple whammy. You know, you've got the cattle grazing, and you've got climate change going on. So it's really, you know, I mean, my conclusion was you better preserve the ones you've got. And, you know, that means fencing them. So anyhow, so that's probably my favorite habitat over there in eastern Montana. Okay, here's some plants that occur there that you don't see very many other places in Montana. Anemone canadensis, Canada anemone, I guess. just a bellflower, but Campanula lanceolata doesn't occur anywhere west of that area. And it's usually in these woody draws. And there's another one. I mean, all of these plants are common further east, but this is as far west as they get. So that's that. All right, now this is the area that we're going to be having the Native Plant Society annual meeting in. It's down. What this really is in a sort of the foothills of the Black Hills. So if you go just a little bit over to the east and south, you'll be in the Black Hills. So you've got some pretty broken country, and you've got ponderosa pine forests. And again, it's quite a different habitat. And it's juxtaposed with all of these. Well, let's see, I think the next one. Yeah, juxtaposed with all of these grasslands. So that was, let's see, that's Chalk Butte. And here is a view to the west of Chalk Butte. And you can see that so what's going on here is Chalk Butte is sandstone, and ponderosa pine establishes in the crevices. So it's pretty dry for trees, but they can get started because there's cracks in the sandstone. And so a ponderosa pine can get its roots down in there and get to some water. So some of you, I don't know if any of you ever noticed this, but if you go to Billings, it's grassland all around there except on the breaks. Right on those breaks on the north side of the Yellowstone River, there's ponderosa pine. And I mean, it looks like it's the driest habitat of all, but in fact, that's where the trees grow because they can drill down without any trouble. And so that's what's going on here, is because you have this uplift, this stuff that whatever, made the Black Hills caused this stuff to go up as well. And that sandstone is what they're after. And so you get these ponderosa pine forests. So this is a little further west. I think this is around, well, the town it's kind of around the town of Bernie, or it's sort of south of Miles City. But it's still in an area. This though is not like those rises, and this is on an uplift as well. But these are an uplift. These are part of a tail end of some mountains that are actually in Wyoming. So, but anyhow, the story is the same. It's got this rock with crevices in it, and so the trees can establish. And this is the kind of stuff that burns all the time, like I think the biggest fire in Montana last summer was out there in this part of the state. Okay, there's just another shot of that same country. You see the trees along in areas where there's rock outcrops and cliffs and things like that. Okay, and one place where I'm sure they'll have field trips is Medicine Rock State Park. And that's sandstone there. And you can see ponderosa pine both in that's ponderosa pine there, and all of these are ponderosa pine. And this is very sandy soil here, so it's different than, if you go further north, most of those breaks are heavy soil. But this particular area, and that whole area around Ekalaka is sandstone. And so you wind up with a lot of ponderosa pine. There's another shot, not too long after winter. Okay, and so a few plants. I think this is pretty much the only place in Montana, this area around Ekalaka and Medicine Rocks, where you get Tradescantia occidentalis. You know the common name for that one? What is it?
Spiderwort.
Oh, spiderwort, okay. All right. And, oh, Jesus. I gotta keep my hands away from that pad. Yeah, so this is, I mean, and again, this Tradescantia, there's quite a few species back east. But I think this is the only one in Montana, and it's only in a couple counties. And this is sort of the epicenter for it. Now, yucca makes it, well, there's only, as far as I know, there's only one place west of the divide where yucca occurs. But it's quite common from the front all the way east. It tends to like sandy soils, but I see it in kind of clay sites too, so. Leucocrinum montanum. I don't know the common name for that one either, but it is in the lily family. And I think it's pretty early in the season, so you don't often see it. But it's common there as well. And then this is, that doesn't seem like, well, it looks better on the screen there. Anyways, Penstemon angustifolius is one of those bigger, taller penstemons, you know, it's like close to being knee high. And it's, again, just in the southeastern corner of the state. Okay, and I have to mention this, since we're talking about eastern Montana, is that a lot of that part of the state is getting screwed up. And, you know, maybe if we didn't have Republicans in charge, this would not be so common, but I think it's going to get more and more common. So there's, you know, what they did, because there's coal underneath that sandstone a lot of times. Well, that's all I have. So are there any questions?